Welcome to the MHP Exchange, where the riches are in the niches. We'll show you how to invest your way into mobile home parks with real strategies, tips, and behind-the-scenes know-how to grow your cash flow. Stick around. This is where smart investing begins.
One of the top questions that I get asked is, why do I invest so far away from where I'm located? So currently we're located in New York City, and our focus has been in the Southeast, and typically red states. And so this question was a lot more prevalent a decade ago when we first started in the manufactured housing space, and people have slowly started to come to the realization of what we had been talking about uh, 10 years ago. But it still gets asked a lot, and I understand that proximity to your investment, creates some comfort. But when we talk about leaving comfort levels, this was one of the comfort levels that we had to overcome to scale our business and to get us to a position where we saw, where we can hit our attain our goals. In New York City right now, or last year, they approved something called the City of Yes, right? So, like most cities across this country, there is an affordability crisis, an issue, and B, there's an undersupply of housing. And quite frankly, depending on which report you read, there's anywhere from 5 million to 7 million housing units short. And that's because we spent a decade since the Great Recession of not building enough to meet the population growth of the country. I mean, that is a fact, and it's just exasperated over the last few years. And you've seen elevated rent prices, housing prices, lack of supply, and it's been an issue that's happened. So New York City, they pushed through this City of Yes, and I've seen people who had invested out of New York and all of a sudden come back because the City of Yes, which would increase density, allow you to add units, or add more density on existing lots. The idea with that would spark a housing boom of multifamily units inside of the city, and that would address some of the affordability issues that we were having. So if you were by transit, if you were by in certain districts, you would have this increased density to build housing. And a lot of people locally, well, even mom and pop investors, came back into the market thinking that this would be a development boom, which sounds great. So after we saw the last 12 months, a rush of people buying these parcels, starting development projects across. I see it in Staten Island where we're located, but it's been true in Brooklyn, it's true in the Bronx, it's true in Queens, that these developments have gone underway. This year, the city council is pushing a bill called the COPA Act, which is the Community Opportunity to Purchase Act. And much like they already have in San Francisco and in Washington, D.C., now any owner of a 3 unit or above, before they sell the property, they have to notify the HPD, which is Housing Preservation and Development, that of their intent to sell, give them an opportunity to buy, and more destructively, give them an opportunity to match any offer that they get in the sales process. So if I own a property and it's a 8-plex or an 8-family, I sit there and I have an offer, I would have to go back to HPD and give them some time to see if they or a qualified not-for-profit wants to match that bid. And they would have, according to this act, up to 120 days to match that. And how destructive this is to the free market is tremendous. I mean, if you're selling your property, you know, potentially a buyer has a 1031, and that maybe that's why they're looking to purchase your property. If that purchaser knows for any reason that another party has a right of refusal that could take you through 120 days, which might have you violate your 1031, you're never going to make an offer on that property. because your risk is too great. No matter how great that the potential of that property may be, your risk is too great. You're going to eliminate that buyer pool. It is going to stop the flow of capital into multifamily inside of New York City if this gets passed. So if you unwind what's happened here, last year, the city approved all this additional density, which got investors excited to potentially develop inside of New York City, and looking at the potential of profit that might be there, or the potential of, I'm going to add, units. I'm going to create these multifamily buildings. Obviously there's demand. And then if I needed to exit, there's all this additional value that I'll be able to create. But on the second hand, now they're telling you in the very next year that if you're going to do that, well, the city or a city agency or a qualified not-for-profit has a right to match, to buy, number one, right? Has to be notified, or has a right to match any offer you might get in the open market, which essentially is going to stop the bidding process. And if you've been involved in any of these in real estate, you understand that it's the flow of capital and the velocity of capital that's so important. And if there's a roadblock or impediment there, investors are going to find another way to an easier path to invest, right? An easier path, um, so they can get clarity on where their capital is going to go. And this has the potential, really, and with everything else that the legislative efforts that happen inside of New York, this has the potential of really creating a bottleneck in investment property inside of New York City, which I think to the detriment of the very people that this bill is looking to serve. Because if capital can't find its way there, you're going to have housing units that are just, neglected, that are just off the market, or just won't be created to meet the demand. So when people ask me, why have you pivoted out of New York City? Well, this is a, you know, big red herring as to why we pivoted out of New York City over a decade ago. And why, when we look at a deal, and we underwrite a deal, you try to look at all the potential risks and challenges that might happen in your business plan. And we know that, you might have, your business plan risk. How fast can I infill a community? How quickly can I maybe get the capital improvements done? Where the value levers are to create some value inside of that asset? How fast can I get that cash flow to turn around? Those are all risks that you can work out on that you could say fall back on the operator. You might have risks where it comes to climate, or you might have risks that come to fire, and those are all insurable risks. But the risk that you can't mitigate is the legislative risk, and where that falls in, um, and what potential impact that might have on your investment. And if in the last we'll call it 18 months now, if I had invested a tremendous amount of money to develop some properties in New York Cities, with my business plan being one thing, and all of a sudden this COPA Act passes, which can completely change my exit valuation, well, there's not a way to overcome that risk. So my point is, where you do business, right, you have to take that into account, especially if you're looking to scale your business. So the comfortability you might have of working around the corner, that's great. But if there's that risk that you can't mitigate, right? And in New York City's instance, is that legislative or ideological risk that, quite frankly, is against um, capitalism or the free market. Then that's something that you really have to consider and take into account, because that's something that, quite frankly, is not quantifiable. Right. So I can I could travel, or I could hire, or I could delegate responsibilities and set outcomes, and ensure that though there's certain measurables that are being hit and not have to be there on site. But what I can't do or don't have the ability to do is write legislation such as COPA or stop 36 council members from approving this or sponsoring this, which basically puts it on the pathway of being approved in a 51 member chamber, puts it on the pathway of being approved. That I can't, I don't have the ability to mitigate. So why do we invest in states where or in markets where there's business clarity and visibility? Is because that's the one risk that we cannot mitigate. So know the markets that you're doing business in and understand the climate that it's in, and make sure, guys, that if you're going to put your capital to work, you know, right? You know you the operational risk, and that's fine. And you have your measures there. You know your insurable risk, and that's fine. You can mitigate that. But make sure you understand the risk that you can't control. And in this instance, it's the legislative risk inside of New York City. So understand that that's a underlooked key in your investment cycle. So before I go, I have one question to ask you for those of you that are listening. Would you help someone you didn't know? Would you help them find, fund, or learn how to operate their next real estate deal? If your answer is yes, then on the streaming platform you're listening, rate this episode and provide a comment below. And if you send that comment to the MHP Exchange, we will send you a copy of our after site visit report. Guys, that's how we keep our team on track and manage assets from a distance. And we'll send you a copy of our after site visit report that we use just because you gave us a rating and you commented below. So until next time, everyone, happy investing.